Welcome back to another Fan Factory Friday, and today we're checking out another save from Deniability. Now, you may remember his last build where Deniability produced an incredible 5x5 tower that was both aesthetically pleasing and built to produce turbo motors up until Update 4's bauxite changes put a spanner in the works. Well, this save, however, was built with a single idea in mind, turning an entire biome into a city, whilst also trying to produce supercomputers at 100% efficiency. So if you do want to check out this save, remember you can head over to satisfactorytips.com. There will be a link to the article in the description where you will be able to access the file yourself. And if you go into vanilla, you can play the game in vanilla. You can play without power for this one, or if you want to experience the save in all its glory, do bear in mind it's going to take up a lot of frames, you can use refined power. So jumping out of the hub, we find ourselves in the rocky desert. The build itself starts from just above the oil islands and works itself across the desert, spanning across the estuary. Now, the first section is the Aluminium Plant, and I love how Deniability buses the bauxite to the islands. The downward arrow shaped kind of buildings along the bus really do look great and lead all that bauxite down to the 18 towers below. These 18 towers work together to produce a total of 450 alclad aluminium sheets. One thing you'll notice throughout is the similarity of the buildings. I feel this is perfect for a build that's trying to create a city, as it blends it all together, but at the same time, each building has its individual quirks. Perhaps it's the tunneling or decorative pipes, and I love here the tightly compacted water extractor on this section, which is then railed in. This particular section produces petroleum coke to be used later in the aluminium production chain, with the following 10 buildings being used to produce aluminium scrap. Now, each building here is designed the same. They're all separate modules to produce the scrap, but designed equally so they're easy to build quickly. This then takes the scrap all the way to this condominium, where it's turned into aluminium ingots. And what I love most about this is the sunken canals in the water. On the opposite side, we also have copper sheets being produced that are used alongside the aluminium ingots to produce a total of 450 alclad sheets. In the next section, we have copper ingots being produced in two small factories off the coast. Now, these are mirrored and look great together, especially with the canal through the middle, joined by diagonal foundations and the glass foundations placed below the surface to give it this great finish. The miners are all housed in similar micro buildings, which you can see scattered throughout the rocky desert. And as we head inland, we can find ourselves at a larger factory dedicated to producing high-speed connectors. These high-speed connectors production floors are spread across the main section and the two wings, but it's the architecture here that I love. The foundations are used alongside the frames to make these chunky supports for the build, and the width of the factory just give it this reinforced feel. Again, I love the symmetry, especially alongside the wall's sunken placement and the balconies. Now, the high-speed connectors do require a fair amount of resources. The first is Silica, which is produced in another larger factory located to the north of this one. Once again, it follows the similar architecture and features a hypertube elevator in the middle and two large resource bus towers in the center either side of this hypertube elevator, with the production wings adjacent to those. The production lines speak for themselves here, using standard manifolds throughout. But like I mentioned, the beauty of this build is the architecture, the feel, the city feel to it. So with that in mind, we'll actually continue to the quick-wire production facility. This particular building looks a lot more similar to the previous Silica build, with the slight differences being the use of the pillars, but also the roofing as well. In this factory, Deniability uses fused quick-wire alternate recipes to produce the required amount. Obviously, with a super build like this, where you're creating lots of super computers as the objective, you need a huge amount of resources. So Deniability is trying to get the most out of all the nodes that he has in this one particular. Behind this, we have a few more buildings. I love the copper ingots being bussed below, along with the water extractor building and water tower. It's just a nice little feature to this section of the map. And this is a fantastic example of how you can use each factory to produce a single item in your world, and then follow it on to the next factory to produce a new item. This is something I quite often recommend people do, although rather than sinking excess resources, which you'll see being done a lot here, these would actually be sent at first to the storage facility and then the excess sunk. This save is most definitely worth checking out yourself, but I am just going to glance over the factories so that you have an idea of what they're producing, and then you can focus more on the architecture. So this brief stop is the Caterium Smeltery. This factory is nicely complemented by the decorational piping, and I love these large double rows of glass walls that they have along the sides as well. Finally, we find ourselves at the Estuary, where the main collection of buildings are. Now, these are all linked together with glass walkways. Obviously, I love the use of the conveyors beneath the glass in this sunken canals, and this is something that I've actually shown off in one of my videos on conveyor logistics and how to use conveyors in your builds. I'll actually put a link to that video in the top right hand corner should you wish to check it out. The whole build is nicely supported, with supports often being resource buses in disguise from the miners down below. And though the power is off to save me some frames, I love the way the steel foundries are fed with the resource lines on the outside and this big glass walkway above it all. If we continue along the roadway, we'll actually arrive at the iron smeltery with the blue doorways. Now you'll notice all the areas are connected by hypertube, allowing for easy transportation between the builds. And behind us, we have also a personal storage area where when you're out exploring, you can send all of your collected items to be produced in the floor above that's hidden away. This red highlighted building is the local concrete factory, and it's integral to this build, with the concrete being used just so much. Below this factory, we also have an iron rod facility. You'll notice throughout, though, they are using the awesome sinks. That way any excess produce can be sunk, and when you're working with large numbers, there's bound to be a surplus somewhere. This just keeps the factory moving, and so you always know how much power you need. Above this, we have some more resource buses and then a copper production line which it follows along to become circuit boards. The plastic comes from the neighbouring refinery building, which produces plastic and rubber using the resin. The side panels that gradually stagger upwards with the piping looks great, and the water enters from the back of this section, fed by a massive water plant just off the coast with another water tower. As I mentioned before, the slight variety in each of these buildings is what makes the factory look unique, whilst at the same time keeping that uniformed look so that it all belongs together. Up until you arrive at the coal generators, of course. The coal generators are featured above the estuary, spanning the mouth. The piping is incredible, but I would love to see this built into an enclosed building, much like the stars that we've seen before this. This isn't the only power used though, as I mentioned. If you want to check out the save yourself, you can open it using refined power if you want the factory to be turned on. As I loaded it without refined power, I've been able to check it out without the factory running, which would have killed my frames. But all in all, this is a great build, and I'd love to see the completed factory producing supercomputers. So perhaps we'll see this later on in the future. But that is all we have time for in this video. Remember to check out the save on Satisfactory tips, and why not drop a like if you like the city's design. Anyway guys, thank you so much for watching, and thank you so much to our amazing supporters, most notably our Solar Eclipse Patreons, the Calamity and Cerebral Tag, as well as our Lunar Eclipse Patreons, Dixie Chris and James Irwin, as well as our Blood Moon of the Day, Shlom. Anyway guys, until next time, as always, ciao for now.